Ham. So, here we are. Season. That doesn't sound right. One moment. No, apparently it is season 1, episode 11, Winter Wrap Up. As a reminder, this is the episode in which Ponyville has to wrap up winter, and so Twilight runs around trying to figure out how she can be useful to the Endeavor and fails miserably constantly for comedic effect until finally she finds her true calling, being a manager. That's the episode in question. Hello, SJ. Anyone else get the impression that this episode was supposed to be earlier on the list or was made before some of the other ones? Because I got that impression pretty hard. It feels like it should have happened back around, say, episode 4 or so. I don't know, just the overall tone of it. It feels more, well, cartoony than most of the other episodes have been of the recent stuff. There's a lot of slapstick comedy and a lot of just... Okay. Oh, yes, and continuing and looking for comments as usual. We are continuing with not having the music playing since we got a complaint about that. So, let us know as ever in the comments section how we're doing with that going forward. So the episode proper, let me move this over here so I can see chat a little bit better. So is this our first real musical episode? I mean, we'll see a full tilt musical much later. But I think this is the first time we've seen a musical ensemble. Savacom apparently agrees, but not Zachariah. Zachariah is pure evil. So that makes sense. Yeah, I think so, because there have been songs. There have been songs since the first episode. But this is the first time there has been a musical number. Which was all right. I mean, I wouldn't listen to it independently, but it's all right. Winter wrap up. I like the instrumental version at the end of the episode, too. That was pretty good. Poisonally. There we go. That's actually very valid, Ethel. You'll notice one of the first things I note in my notes here is, where was Winter? Like, the episode just before this was Swarm of the Century. And they were actively growing crops in that episode. Which I point out because this episode, they're ending winter. Now, this is actually interesting. As much as I praise this show for its background continuity, this is just kind of a, huh? In the future, they'll do a little bit better job with the seasons in general. But to really make this point, in 2 episodes, so next week, Fall Weather Friends will be an episode set in fall. Yeah. They'll get better about this in the future, but can I just say that I hate that? I hate shows that don't do chronological episodes. I really hate that. A lot, actually. Anyways, moving on. So, as much as as much as the show, this episode is just kind of for me. And in fact, I actually generally don't care for this episode that much. I do have to say I really like the core concept, so much so that I could just talk for probably a way too long just about the core concept. Oh, I hate it in the Clone Wars too. God, it drives me nuts when they do that crap. Ugh. Anyways. So, you're probably thinking, what are you talking about? There's one line in this episode, which is actually all they have to say, but there's a lot of little details that add to it. Why not just use magic to clean up winter like they do in Canterlot? That one line, by itself, that speaks volumes. So, I'm trying to think how to properly phrase this. The core idea that they effectively allow winter to happen is actually pretty awesome, in my opinion. It also shows that just about every different area allows winter to happen under their own circumstances and disallows it from happening in their own method. The implication, to my knowledge, we only ever see 2 insights into this, Canterlot and Ponyville. But the implication is that every area has their own particular method for dealing with the seasons. So that's actually really cool. Yes, that's true. They also make winter happen as well, as we'll see in the future. And of course, there's the whole Wendigos thing. That's actually quite a ways off. Let's leave that for the moment. But I do very much enjoy this overall approach to the world building, the idea that these seasons happen. Because my first thought is why? Why do the seasons happen? I came up with two ideas myself in my notes here. Reason number one, it's just generally colder that time of year, anyways. Therefore, they decide to have winter when it's cold, anyways, because that way the snow will actually stick, right? I mean, duh, right? The other reason, though, I happen to like even better. Because the other reason is well, I mean, I guess these aren't mutually exclusive now that I'm thinking about it. The other idea is that every now and again they're like, okay, hang on. We need to establish an order of things, okay? And that means we cannot have summer all year long. Now, that actually makes sense because in real life circumstances, if you have a circumstance where a season goes on a little bit too long or isn't actually showcased properly, or there's some kind of disruption in it, then what you get is dry dirt or mud or swamp, or basically things go badly. Just to summarize really quickly, if you were able to stop the Earth from spinning around the sun, and somehow everything else doesn't go incredibly wrong with that, just bear with me, and everything was just summer forever, that would actually be really bad for the planet, right? I mean, I know this sounds so stupid, but it would be very bad for pretty much everything on the planet. Plants, animals, bugs, and of course, us. So it makes a degree of sense that they basically have to have a series of seasons. And so they follow in this sequence of, okay, we'll make what winter happen and allow winter to happen and then cancel winter. And then we'll make spring happen and then we'll make summer happen and then we'll make fall happen. There's just something really fascinating about that idea. I also happen to enjoy the idea that some of the people anticipate or indeed are looking forward to winter because it's time off. Now, you guys know me. I love social constructs and societies and culture and all sorts of things. So as much as I've been talking about the terraforming and the literal ecology aspect of this, there's a social aspect of this too. If ponies worked all year long, well, you'd have issues, right? And so so the idea that winter is basically the break, the holiday, actually appeals to me tremendously. Like it's like the official time. Okay, you don't have to work the fields, you don't have to harvest, you don't have to bring everything in. We've got all this food packed and ready to go. Actually, Applejack specifically mentions that they have storages of food, which are running out, which then allows which is part of why they're doing this. But the idea here being that. It's an official, socially accepted time for everyone to just kind of chill, right? And not actually have to worry about day-to-day work. In fact, this applies even in a future episode. It's actually one of my favorite episodes with Rainbow Dash and the turtle, whose name I can't think of right now. It's the hibernation episode, if you know the one I'm thinking about. And in that episode, Rainbow Dash is really, really excited about winter because thank you, Tank. Because it's break time. It's winter break. She doesn't have to work. She doesn't have to do her flying stuff. She doesn't have to go and clear the skies. It's winter. She can take time off. So that idea actually continues forward. And of course, we see their Christmas equivalent in another future episode with regards to the Wendigos. So again, I love this idea that in addition to the ecological and environmental reasons that they enforce a season cycle on this world, that they actually have to do so that everyone could just have time off, like just chunk of months off every year. That there's something really cool about that, and I just wanted to talk about that briefly because that's super awesome. Forgive me for jazzing about the world building, but you know me, I love good world building, even for a show that's not chronologically in order. But anyways, moving on. I'm looking. Okay, hang on. So let me look at my notes here again. Here, let's see. I'll talk about that in a minute. Another thing this episode does is it enforces the triad, which is something the show's going to do a lot of, and I kind of like the idea. The triad is Earth ponies, Pegasi, unicorns, and the idea that each of them are different and yet together and unified, yet segregate. That concept is something MLP is going to nail constantly. I just mentioned the Wendigo's Christmas episode, which is another time it comes up. But it is a recurring element of the show, and it's one of the reasons that, to go back to what I was talking about earlier today, for those of you who weren't there, we were talking about trying to be a decent parent and, being aware of what your child is watching. It's a thing that I'm cool with my niece learning. The idea that we can be unified and work together despite and indeed because of our differences. So, looking at my notes. Yeah, Ponyville is actually a very special case on that matter, since all three of them live. Because we know that Canterlot is the unicorn place. Like that's where it's mostly unicorns. And obviously Cloudsdale is almost entirely a Pegasi place. And we'll see other examples of that in the future. But I like to think that Ponyville is not so much unique as just like a step back from unique. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the only place in the entire world that has the trio. It's just one of the places in the world that has the trio. Not, uncommon rather than rare, right? So, and we'll talk about Manhattan later, but yeah, you're right, of course. Will Spike ever get to grow up in the show? Not that I have seen, but I have not seen the last 2 seasons, so make of that what you will. Not counting, of course, the episode, which actually is later this season, if I'm not mistaken. It might not be. No. Now you got me checking. I don't think it's this season. It might be second season. Anyways, yeah, no spoilers. We're trying to keep this linear because a surprisingly large number of viewers have actually been starting this show with us. So that's nice. We will actually be discussing Spike's backstory in episode 16 of season 1. That's going to come up there, I think. Oh, wait, maybe that's not the one. Maybe it's a season 2 episode. Either way, it's going to be coming up. But we are trying to not spoil too much. Obviously, I'll bring up future ideas, but I am trying not to spoil the fact that it was always his sled. And also, Spike is secretly the villain of the entire show. Now, so they actually give a nice list of the various activities that they have to do, what in the world, in order to actually wrap up winter. It's an interesting laundry list because of what it implies. And this is going back to that whole world-building thing that I love about this show. So, they have to remove the snow. Okay, that makes sense because basically the idea is that the environment will not naturally melt the snow. That's what happens in real life. This is why I think that maybe it isn't naturally getting warmer or colder at any given point in the year. They are completely controlling the seasons. Because if it was just getting warmer, the snow would just melt, right? However, it is entirely possible that they want to get rid of the snow specifically because it could melt, and they don't have any features in place to take care of sudden increase in water over the area. So, get rid of the snow, get rid of the clouds. That's old hat. We've seen that since the first episode. They need to wake up the animals, because the animals will not get up from their hibernation themselves. Again, interesting implication, because the idea there is that, well, we know snow is water, so at least that's something. But I do like, it implies that the animals here pretty much are completely reliant on the ponies and the magic and the maintained ecology, the maintained environment, the maintained biome in order to be able to exist. Which makes sense because the ponies already control the seasons, so it would make sense that the animals would be dependent upon them too. What I find interesting is the idea that they may not inherently be dependent, but they may have developed such a dependency. To use a real-life parallel, a dog, right? Like years and years and years and years and years and years of evolution and training has basically made dogs completely domesticated. But you could argue whether or not that's the natural state of a dog, and feral dogs are a real thing, right? See, the funny thing is, so Detective Rarity points out the Everfree Forest, and so does Shikor. As I mentioned before, if I'm not mistaken, they kind of abandoned that entire idea for the Everfree Forest. Like, they mention, oh my god, everything there is natural, except they don't say it that way. And then, like, that's never brought up again that I'm aware of, so who knows on that one. That could have been an abandoned plot thread. Would be the first time we see that in a show. Ahem. What's that? Yeah, we haven't heard from the Romulans in 50 years. Wink. Anyways. That's why we have someone who defected to the Romulans 18 years ago. Anyway, so moving on. I'll have to take your word on that, Detective Rarity. I know the comics tend to cover things that the shows don't. In fact, the comics are the only reason we know about the evil force that infests both Luna and Celestia and Rarity. But I have not, no, Act. It probably is quite amusing, though. Yeah, the nightmare, haha. Anyway, sorry. Okay, so they have to wake up the animals, getting back to my point. They have to remove the ice. Okay, same general concept with the snow. They have to plant new seeds, obvious. Although, what's interesting about that in its own right is the implication is there that seeds don't do their thing normally. Now, this is going to sound kind of strange here, but let me step back a moment and try to explain what I'm talking about here. If you plant an apple seed in a generally beneficial environment for an apple tree to grow, it'll grow and then it'll make more apple seeds completely on its own. You can just walk away, fire and forget, right? Now, obviously, they're planting crops, and that is different than just seeds being done. But I have to admit, it made me wonder if there is actually a situation in which most of the plants and otherwise don't have the, again, evolutionary buildup or backing that allows them to have seeds with food for the seed that then has a method of a vehicle in order to get it to the point where it can then grow in a new location. It doesn't have all of that stuff that real life plants do because the plants have been cared for by the ponies for so long that they never developed that evolutionary tendency, right? It's just interesting to think about. Again, I don't have any particular evidence of that. It's just something I'm pondering because it got me thinking about it. By the way, you can tell I was thinking a lot about the world building here because it's me. I'm going to pause the thing here for a second because I meant to do this earlier, but I'm a moron. Check it out. Anybody play Magic the Gathering? Trying to be kind of cautious with this. I'm not sure what I think of the art style. Put that there. So this is a foil. So, Magic the Gathering card here. And an actual Twilight. This is an official one by Hasbro. Although there's only the 3, which really sucks. I was hoping to get a whole set. But it's for charity, so I don't mind. So yeah, Princess Twilight Sparkle. 1 white, 1 blue, legendary creature, alicorn, flying. Other alicorns, horses, pegasi, ponies, and unicorns you control get +1/+1. You can spend 1 white, blue, black, red, and green mana, and if you control Applejack, Fluttershy, Pinkie Pie, Rainbow Dash, and Rarity, everybody wins the game. Now, obviously, that card is no use because those other cards don't exist. Rarity is here, though. She is a 1 generic, 1 white, 1 blue, rare mythic. So rare and mythic spells you cast cost 1 neutral less to cast, and you can spend a neutral and tap to reveal a My Little Pony toy you actually own, which I'd be screwed on. This is as close as I got. Until end of turn, another target creature gains protection from each color in that toy's coat, mane, and outfit. This one's a fun one. This one's Nightmare Moon. I love the art on this. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to share it all that well. You're going to have to take my word for it because you can see the foil is kind of screwing with the camera there. She costs 4 generic, 2 black. She is a legendary creature, flying, 6/6, by the way. As long as it's nighttime, Nightmare Moon gets +2/+2 and has menace. However, for 6 generic mana, you can transform her. Anybody can activate this ability or help pay the cost. When they do, they become your friend. Now, that then turns her into Princess Luna, who also has an awesome thing. Now, she's a 4/4 creature with flying. However, when this creature transforms into Princess Luna, you may choose 6 cards from your own outside of the game with a moon in their artwork, and then exile those cards. As long as those cards remain exiled, you may cast them, and your friends may cast them with your permission. So if you were doing a 2-headed giant game, this would be really mean. But notice, only friends can cast them, so only people who helped you to cast this. So for example, if one of your enemies helps you to cast the switch over, they then become your friend in terms of legal rule terms, and they now have the ability to cast some of the spells you have set aside. Now, I know this is all stupid because this is not intended to be a real set or whatever, but I like how actual thought was put into the balance and style and design of these cards. It depends on the rules of the tournament, Dream Whisperer. There's actually very specific types of rules with regards to what cards are allowed at any given tournament. So under certain rules, yes, these would be allowed. Although, as I said earlier, Twilight Princess would be kind of worthless because those other cards do not exist. Just wanted to share those really quick. I mostly got that for charity, if I'm being honest. No, someday I'm going to make my own set and print it out and show it off on stream. Based on viewers, of course. So each viewer is going to be a card. So, where was I? So, they also have to... So there's another one. Sorry, getting back to the actual thing that... So, the other things that are dependent upon them for manually controlling the seasons, they have to make nests for the birds. Now, a couple things about that. First of all, again, it's the same exact mentality I already pointed out, that the birds, you know, hypothetically speaking, are so reliant on the ponies that they can't nest themselves. They don't really know how to. Of course, Aethel. See, now, Shikor points this out, because there's a lot of debatability and speculation here. It's entirely possible the birds do still have the ability to nest. It's also possible they're just making nests because, you know, they're trying to welcome the animals. I kind of, if I'm being honest, I kind of like to think it's pretty much right in the middle. That if push came to shove, the birds could nest, but they don't because they usually don't have to. Because, you know, the ponies do it for them. To go back to my example with dogs, most dogs are fairly domesticated. However, if you put a dog out in the wild and treat it pretty badly, it will revert to a bestial animal and a wild dog fairly quickly. It still has the ability to survive and function on its own, even though it's a domesticated animal, right? So, in other words, the idea being that the birds can, they just don't. That's my thinking on it. Let's see, look at the notes here. And yeah, the Everfree Forest, which is apparently going to be brought up in the future. I'm going to have to pay attention for that. Let's see here. What else we got? It's also possible it's just the birds that specifically go to Ponyville. That could be a thing, too. Because we don't know if other... all we know is that other areas deal with winter in their own way. So we don't know if they literally make nests for animals in Canterlot, for example. So, there's a nice little tidbit where she's talking about, how am I going to do this without magic? Because that's all her shtick, right? And of course, she's from Canterlot, where they do everything with magic. But no, she's going to insist on doing it the hard way. 2 notes. 3, actually. First of all, there's a nice little bit of foreshadowing there. You notice that she's trying to get her... We've seen her get dressed with magic before, and she'll do that in the future as well. She tries to get the saddle on without magic. She fails. Just a little bit of foreshadowing there. The other thing I wanted to mention, though, is the obvious logic flaw. That she has to have... That she must use no magic whatsoever. As opposed to thinking of it in terms of using careful application of magic. Unicorns do exist in Ponyville, after all. And, of course, the final and most pertinent flaw in her logic is the fact that she is presuming that magic is her only talent, which it very much is not, even as established now. Speaking of foreshadowing... Yep, Rarity did too. Speaking of foreshadowing, I love the bit where she's like, okay, here's all the materials to make the nest. And Twilight very neatly and precisely organizes them all by type and color and length. So it's all very neat and organized. And I was just like, oh, yep. I have to admit, I didn't catch that before until this particular view through. I wanted to say playthrough, but that doesn't really apply. You get the point. Also, as a quick aside, can I just say that I really feel for Twilight there? Like, you ever, made something with pottery, or drawn something, or painted something, and it looks nothing like what you're picturing? like you ever Yeah. Anyways, really felt for her on that one. I knew it, Savacom. See, I just stopped making things. I gave up. I suck. So now I know I've talked a lot about only a few things. There's a lot of scenes which are just slapstick. I could just say slapstick, and then we just move on. But there's a surprising amount of depth in very minor points in this episode. I mean, look how long we talked about the environment thing. There's a line where Pinkie says, "Oh, I bet I sucked my first time too," and Twilight says, "Really?" And Pinkie says, "No, but did I make you feel better?" That line says a lot. That is probably one of the first real insights into Pinkie Pie right there, and everything going on there. My God. How much does she force herself to smile to help to endure? Like, obviously, she doesn't know anything like true hardship, and obviously she doesn't have some horrible tortured existence, but that really does say a lot about how much Pinkie tries very hard to cheer people up, even if she doesn't actually make things better. Just, whew. And of course, obviously, her intention is to help. And she doesn't know how to literally help. She doesn't know how to make things better. So instead, all she can do is try to make her feel better. Right? And you could say a lot about that one way or the other, but I'm kind of with her on this personally. That's my opinion. Because every now and again, you can't make things better. All you can do is make yourself feel better. Make of that what you will. You know what I mean, act. Within the confines of the setting, sure, she's had some hardships, but... Anyway, so then Twilight is scared of snakes, because, she's a horse. Yep, okay. And then bats, and then bees, and then skunks. Slapstick, moving on. Winter slapstick, winter slapstick. Taking the joke. Another sign of the Earth Pony strength thing that I've been pointing out bit by bit. Twilight can barely move the snowplow. Do you notice that? She's just like... and she cannot move that thing at all. And everyone else is effortlessly just, yep, whatever. I just pointed out because I once again get the impression very strongly that the whole Earth Ponies have supernatural strength thing wasn't designed. It wasn't part of the initial document. And they just kept looking at all of these circumstances in which Earth Ponies coincidentally were stronger and just kind of, developed the trait after the fact. Again, that's just my impression. Let me use a direct comparison of what I'm talking about. Sorry, you can't hear the music, of course. That's a weird song choice. Oh God, what are they called? Trill. The Trill species over in Star Trek. So, for those of you not aware, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, they decided they wanted Dax to be a Trill. Now, originally, they made her look like the Trill from TNG, and then they kiboshed that because they wanted Terry Farrell to look more attractive. So, because they only hired her for her looks because sexism, which is it's a shame because Terry Farrell actually turned into a good actress over the course of that show, but I'm getting off topic. The Trill species basically didn't exist at the beginning of Deep Space Nine. They had spots, and they had a symbiote, and that's all they knew. Like, those 2 bullet points were all they'd written. This is not conjecture. This is something we know from design documents, from scripts, and from interviews. And as time went on, they would look at the way Terry Farrell would portray a role, or the way people would react to her, and they'd say, oh, hey, maybe that indicates that the symbiote actually does this. And they would basically develop the Trill species over the course of Deep Space Nine in response to things that were coincidentally happening to Dax the character. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about here with regards to the Earth Pony thing. And frankly, I think that's true with all 3 of the pony types. In fact, actually, all 4 of the pony types, if I could be so bold, with regards to this show, that they just kind of developed them over time based on how things were happening. I don't know that for certain, but I've been getting that impression pretty strongly. Also, I hate to nitpick this episode. Why does she lose control of her snowplow after she uses her magic? She's clearly maintaining the spell that's keeping it going. So, actually, I enjoy a good backloaded storytelling myself, Shikor. As I've said many times, I prefer both front-loaded and backloaded storytelling. Just, in relatively appropriate measure. Oh, yeah, of course, winter slapstick. It just needs to be the thing. That's a good question, Dream Whisperer. I can only speculate on that, though. I'm not even sure if they show that in the future. It's entirely possible that they rent the seasons, which actually is a fascinating idea. Now you got me thinking. But I don't know, is the answer. Not that I'm aware of, Baron, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not the expert, after all. So anyways, moving on. So I've mentioned a lot of the small notes in this show that I like. There's a really small note that I almost missed. Applejack yells at Twilight, understandably so, and Twilight runs off in literal tears. Applejack doesn't have an audible response to that, but if you look at Applejack's face, she is immediately crushed, like, oh. Like, she clearly didn't mean to actually hurt Twilight that way. It's a really tiny note, and again, it's nice to see little stuff like that. After all, she wasn't trying to be mean, and we don't want to encourage meanness, do we? Just little touches. So I mentioned the foreshadowing thing. If you're paying attention, and I'm pretty sure this is done on purpose, the snowplows are just going, like, in random directions all over the place. No rhyme or reason to it. Some of them are literally going towards each other. Pinkie's doing random patterns in the ice. There's, I had another note, and I can't seem to find it. Well, whatever. Here's another really big one. No one's organizing anything. Do you notice that? Twilight shows up, and no one says, hey, here's you, here's your job. Instead, she just has to figure it out. And even amongst the leaders of each given job, no one's actually organizing anything. And the leaders can't agree with each other. And the only this is actually kind of sad if we're being honest, the mayor actively makes things worse. She flat out says, oh, I thought my inspiring speech would get the job done. As if the only thing she had to do to be a good leader was give an inspiring speech. Not actually lead. Someone earlier in chat mentioned that they didn't think that the mayor, I can't think of her name, the mayor is any better of a leader than Celestia, and I agree. Because she's not a good leader at all, and this is consistent going forward even. There's a few things she tends to be good at later on, but leadership is not one of them. Mayor, that's it, thank you. Gotta have the puns. What's funny is later on we find out that their names can change once they get their cutie mark. Mrs. Cake, that comes up. So it's actually interesting because it means their names being appropriate makes sense because that's when they get their adult name. Mayor Main's died. She's totally not died. It's definitely not Pink. Shut up, Baron. Exactly, Savacom. Yeah, nobody gave Twilight a job, who is new in town, and they all know this, and she doesn't know what's going on here. And she doesn't have the materials, and she doesn't know what to go, and no one actually really directs her. Did you catch that? What did Rarity do? Here's your materials, make a nest. Okay, what did Fluttershy do? Okay, that's not fair. Fluttershy was probably the closest to actually giving her real attention. Like, okay, here you go in, you ring the bell, and you get them out. But she didn't warn her at all. She didn't tell her what she was doing or where she was interacting or what the consequences would be. Probably the worst one is Applejack, who was just like, here's a plow. It really is indicative of just how nonsensical this is. And it kind of brings me to the message. So the core intended message of the episode is very obvious. Hi, Cord. Feel better. The intended message of the episode is very obvious. Everything has something to contribute, whatever those talents may be. She even says that in her letter to Celestia. But if I could be so bold, I don't think that's the core message here. I think the core message here is organization. There is a difference between a giant mob rolling over towards its target and teamwork. Teamwork at its core is really about coordination, about identifying who is good at what and making sure they work alongside everyone else so nobody's hooves cross, right? That's teamwork. That's coordination. That is actual organization. And the episode shows very clearly how smoothly and quickly and better everything goes in the final montage once someone is properly leading everything. Now, this is probably, in my opinion, again, backloaded storytelling, this is probably when the idea of Twilight being a leader really started to grow, or the idea really started to be tucked in there. Because what she does here is what a leader should do, in my opinion. Not give a big speech and smile and wave, although those are valuable assets to have, legitimately, but to actually lead, to take the action, the verb of managing something. And she manages to turn things around. Even though she's behind by that point, I feel like pointing out. Just point it out. I mean... I like that, Chic. Or lead. Depending on how you pronounce it, you sink or you move forward. What do you mean, lead? Ah! Anyways. Are those showing up? Those are showing up. Oh, but it's in the wrong spot. Hang on, hang on. I may have to fix that off camera. Hang on, I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. Give me a second. Well, thank you very much, Solaris. I'm glad you're enjoying the Streaminations, which I still have to give credit to Sinisterwing. He's the one who named them. But again, thank you very much, sir. And I will put that towards whatever. So last question before I, chop off and move on to the next episode. Do you think this episode qualifies as a wah-wah? Because it's kind of a gray area, right? Like, first it's like, oh my gosh, Spike is left. At first it ends on a literal wah-wah with him being out on the ice and ha ha ha, giggle, giggle, giggle. He's trapped on an ice floe in the middle of a lake. But then, she does the, oh, here's my lesson of the week thing. And then, oh, Spike's fallen asleep because he's so tired because he's sick. Ha ha ha. I think it qualifies, but I thought I'd ask you guys what you think. Spike did get woken up in the middle of the night. Yeah, someone mentioned this earlier. Spike is very just brusque and blunt about his mockery this episode. He is unapologetic in how mean he is this episode. It's actually kind of... In fact, it's so that it's also contributes a little bit to that, maybe this was an early episode thing. Maybe this was a demo reel episode, because my goodness. I'm not sure, Dream Whisper, like I said. Granted, Twilight was not very nice to him as well. I'll give you that. And she never has been to date. As of up till modern, she still has not been nice to Spike. I swear that changes in the future, I think. Where she starts actually treating him like a frickin' person. Instead of, I think it qualifies as a wah-wah. So we're going to add that to the wah-wah counter. Boop. Which leads us to the end of this one. So we're going to go ahead and chop it off.